I stand frozen in my doorway, my silk robe clinging to my damp skin after my shower. I can't tear my eyes away from Alex, my stepson, as he grips the edge of his desk. His bare chest glistens in the dim light of his bedroom, every muscle defined. The space between us feels electric, charged with something I'm afraid to name. "I heard you crying again," he whispers, taking a step toward me. My heart hammers against my ribs. When did this boy become a man? At 19, he towers over me now, broad-shouldered and strong. I shiver as his fingers brush my shoulder. "We shouldn't—" The protest dies in my throat. My traitorous body melts into his warmth, my cheek pressed against his chest. His heartbeat thunders. "Let me take care of you," he breathes into my hair, "like you've always taken care of me." When his lips find mine in the darkness, I know I should pull away. But I don't. Who is this woman, you're probably asking? Well, I'm Emma Crawford, 38 and suddenly adrift. 3 months ago, my husband David walked out on a random Tuesday morning. 12 years of marriage ended with the slam of a door and the lingering scent of another woman's perfume. The bastard even cleaned out our joint account before running off to Cabo with his secretary, some perky blonde barely older than my stepson. Now it's just me and Alex in this echoing house. I've been his mother in all but blood since he was 7, after we lost his birth mom. He's in college now but lives at home to save money. Such a sweet boy, always bringing me tea, holding me while I cry, trying to fill the hollow spaces his father left behind. Sometimes when he looks at me, I see shadows of David in those dark eyes. But where David's gaze made me feel small, Alex's sets my skin on fire. When he comes home from the gym, shirt off and skin gleaming. God, the thoughts that race through my mind would horrify my therapist. She says I'm just lonely, seeking comfort in the familiar. But there's nothing familiar about the way my pulse races when Alex touches me, or how I lie awake at night imagining what his hands would feel like on my bare skin. I should stop this, create distance, be the parent. But every night I find myself walking past his door in my best nightgown, hoping he'll notice, praying he'll stop me, aching for him to. The day David left, it was raining. Funny how I remember that detail. Raindrops sliding down window panes like the tears I couldn't shed yet. I stood there, arms wrapped around myself, watching him methodically empty our shared life into a single suitcase. "I never meant for this to happen," he said softly, but the words rang hollow. 12 years of marriage reduced to a cliché. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to demand answers. Instead, I stood silent, dignity the only thing I had left to cling to. When the door closed behind him, the sound echoed through my empty house like a gunshot. I sank to the floor, still in my coffee-stained robe from breakfast. The breakfast where he'd told me about her, about the baby, about everything. Alex found me there hours later, makeup streaked down my face, staring at nothing. My beautiful, gentle stepson who'd lost his birth mother so young, now watching his family fracture again. He didn't say a word, just sat beside me on the cold hardwood floor and held my hand. The weeks that followed blur together in my memory. Sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling, phantom echoes of David's snoring taunting me. Days moving through rooms that suddenly felt too big, too empty. Alex became my anchor in the storm, my constant when everything else was chaos. He started bringing me coffee in the mornings, just the way I like it. Would sit with me during those awful quiet evenings when loneliness pressed in like a physical weight. His presence filled the hollow spaces David left behind, but differently. Warmer, kinder, more attentive than his father ever was. Sometimes I catch him watching me with worried eyes when he thinks I'm not looking. Such an old soul in a young man's body. He shouldn't have to carry my burden, shouldn't have to be the strong one. But he is. And that's what terrifies me most. Because lately when he hugs me goodnight, I find myself lingering too long. When he smiles, my heart flutters in ways it shouldn't. The love I've always felt for him is shifting, transforming into something that makes my skin flush and my conscience ache. I tell myself it's just grief playing tricks with my heart. that I'm latching onto the only man who hasn't abandoned me. My therapist would say I'm seeking comfort in familiar places, trying to heal one wound by creating another. But she doesn't see how his eyes soften when they meet mine across the dinner table. Doesn't understand how safe I feel when he holds me through my tears. Doesn't know how my soul recognizes something in his that speaks of more than just stepmother and stepson. The guilt eats at me daily. I raised this boy, loved him as my own. Now here I am, a woman of 38, fighting feelings that could destroy everything. Some nights I lie awake, wondering if this is my punishment for not being enough for David, for failing as a wife, and now failing as a mother too. But when Alex smiles at me, brings me tea, tells me I'm beautiful when I feel anything but, God help me, I can't stop my heart from beating faster. Can't stop wondering what it would be like to be loved by someone who sees me, really sees me, instead of looking through me like David did. I know we're walking a dangerous line. Each day, the boundary between appropriate and forbidden grows thinner. But in my darkest moments, when loneliness threatens to swallow me whole, it's not David's arms I dream of anymore. And that terrifies me more than anything. I never expected to rediscover myself at 38, in the fluorescent lit classroom of the community college where I teach art history. But here I am, 3 months post-David, watching my students' faces light up as I describe the passion behind Van Gogh's brushstrokes. Teaching has become my salvation, the one place where I'm still wholly myself, not someone's ex-wife or confused stepmother. Between classes, I've started sketching again. My office becomes a sanctuary during lunch breaks, charcoal spreading across paper as I try to capture the world around me. Sometimes I draw my students, sometimes the campus gardens. But increasingly, I find myself drawing him. Alex's profile as he studies, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug, the way his shoulders slope when he thinks no one's watching. I've joined a divorce support group that meets Wednesday nights at the local library. We're a mismatched bunch. Karen the pediatrician whose husband left her for his nurse, Tom the accountant raising 3 kids alone, Sarah who's younger than Alex but already dealing with a cheating spouse. They've become my lifeline, the only people who truly understand this strange limbo I'm living in. You need to date, Karen insisted last week, sliding a wine glass my way during our after-meeting drinks. Get back out there. I tried. God knows I tried. Let them set me up with Tom's brother, a kind man with gentle eyes and steady hands. But sitting across from him at dinner, all I could think about was Alex waiting at home, probably worried about where I was if I was okay. I've thrown myself into exercise, joining a morning yoga class where nobody knows my story. The instructor, May, has become a friend. She doesn't judge when I stay after class, twisting my body into increasingly complex poses until the inappropriate thoughts about my stepson fade to a dull roar. Your form has improved dramatically, she told me yesterday, but your heart's not at peace. If she only knew. Work keeps me busy. I'm up for department chair next semester, something I never would have pursued when David was around. He always said my career should come second to supporting his. Now I'm staying late, restructuring curricula, mentoring younger professors. My colleagues have noticed the change in me. You've come alive, Professor Williams remarked during faculty lunch. Divorce suits you. Does it? Some days I think he's right. I feel more myself than I have in years. My art is improving. My students respond to my newfound passion. I'm making decisions without second-guessing every choice. But then I come home to Alex cooking dinner in our kitchen, looking so domestic it makes my chest ache. He's learned all my favorite recipes, claims he's practicing for when he moves out. But I see how he watches for my reaction when I take that first bite, beaming with pride when I close my eyes in pleasure. I've started taking long drives on weekends, exploring winding country roads with no destination in mind. Sometimes I pull over just to breathe, to remind myself I'm still here, still whole despite everything. The local coffee shop 2 towns over has become my hidden sanctuary. Nobody there knows me as David's ex or Alex's stepmom. I'm just Emma, the woman who orders lavender lattes and sketches in the corner. Last Saturday, a handsome stranger asked about my drawings. He was exactly my type, distinguished gray at his temples, Kind smile, wedding ring conspicuously absent. We talked for hours about art and travel and second chances. He asked for my number. I gave him a fake one. Because even sitting there with this perfect on paper man, my mind wandered home to Alex, wondering if he'd eaten lunch, if he was lonely, if he missed me as much as I already missed him. My therapist says I'm using Alex as an excuse not to move on, that I'm clutching at the last stable relationship in my life because I'm afraid to risk my heart again. She's probably right. But she doesn't see how alive I feel when I'm teaching now, knowing he sometimes sits in the back of my lectures just to support me. Doesn't understand how my art has evolved, capturing not just images, but emotions I never knew I could express. Doesn't realize that maybe, just maybe, this catastrophe of a marriage ending has freed me to become who I was always meant to be. Even if who I'm becoming terrifies me. The days flow into weeks. I paint, I teach, I drive my aimless drives. I listen to other people's stories of healing and try to believe my own heart will mend. I tell myself these inappropriate feelings will fade, that one day I'll look at Alex and see only my stepson again. But every evening I come home to find him waiting, those dark eyes full of something that mirrors my own confusion, my own longing. And I wonder if healing is supposed to feel like falling, or if I'm just finding new ways to break. I sat beside him, our shoulders touching as we leafed through memories. "You made it easy to love you," I whispered, then immediately regretted the words. But Alex just leaned closer, his warmth seeping into my side. The thunderstorm last month changed everything. A massive oak fell, taking out our power. We huddled together on the couch, sharing body heat and stories in the candlelight. I told him things I'd never told anyone, about my fears, my dreams before David, the art career I'd abandoned. "Show me," he insisted. So I did, digging out old sketchbooks from the attic. His fingers traced my drawings reverently. "You're incredible," he breathed. "You should never have stopped." The next day, an easel appeared in my room, brand new, with supplies he'd obviously researched carefully. "No more excuses," he said simply. Now he sits for me sometimes, reading or studying while I sketch. The intimacy of those sessions is intoxicating, the play of light on his face, the trust in his eyes when they meet mine over the canvas. Last night, something shifted. I was painting late, struggling with a particularly difficult piece. Frustration had me in tears when Alex found me. "Let me help," he murmured, stepping behind me. His hands covered mine on the brush, guiding my strokes. I could feel his heartbeat against my back, his breath warm on my neck. Time suspended. Neither of us moved. His thumb stroked circles on my wrist, sending shivers down my spine. "Emma," he whispered. "Not mom, not stepmom, just Emma." I turned in his arms, knowing I shouldn't. His eyes were dark pools in the studio's dim light. One hand rose to cup my cheek, thumb brushing away a tear. The air crackled between us. His gaze dropped to my lips. Then headlights swept across the windows as a car turned into our driveway. We jumped apart like guilty teenagers. My hands shook as I cleaned my brushes, hyper-aware of his presence behind me. "I should go to bed," he said finally, voice rough. "Early class tomorrow." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. But at the door he paused. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "I won't leave you like he did." The promise in those words terrifies me, because I know he means them. And I know that every day, every shared moment, every lingering touch is drawing us closer to something we can't take back. Something that could destroy us both. Tonight, I sit in my studio staring at my latest painting, a study in shadows and light, longing and restraint. Alex's profile is unmistakable, though I tried to disguise it. My fingers trace the curve of his jaw on canvas, remembering the warmth of his skin under my hands. I should stop this. Should create distance. Should be the responsible one. But when I hear his footsteps in the hallway, hesitating outside my door, I know I won't. God help me, I know I won't. Now back to the evening we first talked about. That night still haunts my dreams. The air was thick with summer heat, making my silk robe cling as I walked the hallway after my shower. Steam curled around me like ghostly fingers, carrying the scent of my lavender body wash. I hadn't meant to stop at his door. Hadn't meant to notice the soft lamplight spilling into the hall, or how the shadows played across his bare shoulders as he sat at his desk. But I froze there, watching him write in his journal, something he'd started doing after David left. He must have sensed my presence. When he turned, those dark eyes held something I'd been trying to ignore for months. Something that made my breath catch and my heart race. "I heard you crying again," he said softly, standing. The movement was fluid, graceful. When had my stepson become this man who filled doorways with his presence? I clutched my robe tighter, aware of how little I wore underneath. "I'm fine," I whispered, but my voice betrayed me, cracking on the lie. "No," he said, crossing the space between us. "You're not." His fingers brushed my shoulder, feather light but burning. I should have stepped back, should have wished him good night, should have done anything except lean into his touch like a flower-seeking sun. "We shouldn't," I began, but the words died as his arms enfolded me. My cheek pressed against his chest, his heartbeat thundering beneath my ear. He smelled of soap and skin and something uniquely Alex, familiar yet thrilling. "Let me take care of you," he breathed into my hair, "like you've always taken care of me." Time suspended. The house held its breath. His hands traced patterns on my back through the silk, each touch sending shivers down my spine. I knew I should pull away, but I'd been so lonely, so touch-starved, so desperate for connection. When his lips found mine in the darkness, it felt inevitable, like gravity, like falling, like coming home. What happened next lives in the spaces between heartbeats. Morning found us changed, lines crossed, boundaries shattered, the air heavy with unspoken words and the weight of what we'd done. I slipped back to my room before dawn, my robe wrinkled, my lips still tingling from his kisses. Guilt and desire warred in my chest. Now we exist in this new reality. Every shared glance holds secrets. Every accidental touch sparks memories. Every night, I lie awake wondering if he'll knock on my door. And every night I pray he will. We're playing with fire, dancing on the edge of disaster. One wrong move could burn everything we've built. But when he looks at me across the dinner table, when his hand brushes mine passing the salt, when I catch him watching me with those hungry eyes. Her name is Rachel, and she's been my best friend since college. The only person I trust with secrets this dark. We sit in her garden, wine glasses in hand, while her kids play at their dad's for the weekend. The setting sun paints everything golden, making this confession feel almost dreamlike. "I've done something terrible," I whisper, staring into my glass like it holds answers. The words catch in my throat, but Rachel waits patiently. She's always been good at silence. When I finally tell her, the story spills out like water through broken glass. Everything. The growing tension, the lingering touches. That night. Her face remains carefully neutral. Years of working as a psychologist serving her well. "Emma," she says finally, reaching for my trembling hands. "What exactly are you asking me?" "I don't know," I admit. "To tell me I'm horrible? To help me stop this? I pause, voice dropping. To tell me it's okay?" She sets her wine down, choosing her words carefully. "You're not horrible. You're human. And you're both consenting adults. But," she squeezes my hands, "this could destroy everything. Your reputation, your career, your relationship with Alex, both as a mother and whatever this is becoming." "I know," I whisper. "God, Rachel, don't you think I know?" "Have you considered leaving?" she asks gently. "Taking that teaching position in Seattle you mentioned?" The thought makes my chest tight. I can't abandon him like David did.
Or maybe you just don't want to, she observes, ever the therapist.
The truth of it hits me hard. No, I don't want to leave. Don't want to imagine mornings without his sleepy smile over coffee, evenings without his quiet presence in my studio.
He's not a child anymore, I say defensively. He's 22, successful, mature,
and still your stepson, Rachel finishes softly. Emma, honey, what's your endgame here? Secret rendezvous forever? Coming out to family and friends? Marriage?
The questions make my head spin. I haven't thought that far ahead. Can't imagine navigating those complicated waters.
Right now, I admit, I'm just trying to survive each day without drowning in guilt or desire. Rachel tops off our wine, her expression thoughtful. Maybe that's your answer then. Take it day by day. But Emma, she catches my eye. Set boundaries. Clear ones, for both your sakes.
What if I can't? The question comes out small, frightened. Then be prepared for the consequences. She pulls me into a hug, fierce and protective. Whatever you decide, I'm here. No judgment.
On the drive home, her words echo in my mind. Boundaries, consequences, future. The sunset paints the sky in shades of fire, reminding me of Alex's touch, his passion, his promises. I park in our driveway, sitting there long after the engine dies. Through the window, I see him in the kitchen, cooking dinner like any other evening. So domestic, so forbidden, so desperately wanted. My phone buzzes, Rachel checking I got home safe. Her text reads, "Remember, whatever you choose it fully. No half measures. They only lead to half happiness." I watch Alex move through our kitchen, the space we've shared for years now charged with new meaning. He looks up, catches me watching. His smile could light up cities. Taking a deep breath, I step out of the car. Whatever comes next, Rachel's right. No more hiding from hard decisions. No more letting guilt and desire wage war in my chest. Tonight, I'll tell him about Seattle, about boundaries, about consequences. Tonight, we'll decide if this fire between us is worth the risk of burning everything down. I never made it to the conversation I'd planned. The moment I stepped into the kitchen, the weight of everything Rachel and I discussed disappeared into the familiar comfort of our evening routine. Alex had made my favorite, chicken marsala with roasted vegetables. The same recipe his grandmother taught him before she passed. The kitchen smelled of garlic and wine, and he'd opened the windows to let in the cooling evening air. "You were gone a while," he said carefully, stirring the sauce. Not accusatory, just concerned. Always concerned about me. I was at Rachel's. I moved to set the table, our choreographed dance in the kitchen as natural as breathing. We talked. He stilled just for a moment. About us? The word us hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "She's the only one who knows," I said softly. "The only one who might understand." He turned then, crossing the space between us with those graceful steps that still make my heart stutter. His hands found mine, stilling them as I fidgeted with the silverware. "And?" His voice was low, careful. "What did she say?" I looked up into those eyes I'd watched grow from child to man. She asked me what our endgame is, what we're doing, where this leads. His thumb traced circles on my wrist, sending shivers up my arm. "And what did you tell her?" I told her I don't know. The honesty hurt, but he deserved it. That I'm terrified of losing you, but equally terrified of keeping you. That every time I try to do the right thing, my heart fights against my head. He pulled me closer, until I could feel his heartbeat against my chest. "The right thing according to who?" he murmured. "Society? My father? The same people who said it was right for me to watch him hurt you for years?" "Alex." My voice broke on his name. "No," he said firmly. "I've watched you sacrifice your happiness for others my whole life.
Watched you dim your light to make my father shine. I won't let you do it anymore.
The timer dinged, making us jump apart. He returned to the stove while I tried to steady my breathing, to remember all the reasons I'd listed with Rachel about why this needed to stop. But watching him plate our dinner with such care, remembering how he'd learned my favorite foods, how he'd supported my art, how he'd held me through the darkness after David left. "There's a teaching position," I blurted out. "In Seattle. They want me to start next semester." The plate he was holding clattered slightly as he set it down. His back was to me, shoulders tense. "Is that what you want?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. "I want to stop feeling guilty for loving you," I whispered. "I want to stop wondering if I've corrupted you somehow, if I've taken advantage." He turned so quickly I gasped. "I'm not a child," he said fiercely. "I know exactly what I want, who I want. The question is, do you?" The air crackled between us, charged with everything unsaid. Outside, a car alarm went off, then silenced. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. "Seattle would be good for my career," I said weakly. "That's not an answer." He stepped closer, one hand rising to cup my cheek. "Emma, look at me." I did, drowning in those dark eyes that held my whole world. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "Tell me you don't want this, want us, and I'll step back. We'll go back to being stepmother and stepson. I'll support whatever decision you make. But don't run away because you think it's what you should do. Don't let fear make this choice for you." His thumb brushed my lower lip, and my eyes fluttered closed. "The food's getting cold," I murmured. "Emma." "I can't tell you to stop," I admitted finally, opening my eyes to meet his gaze. "God help me, Alex, I don't want you to stop." Seattle would have to find another art history professor. Sometimes choosing happiness means choosing complications, means choosing judgment and secrecy and difficult conversations ahead. The autumn rain matched my mood as I sat in Rachel's kitchen a month later. The easy comfort of our usual wine nights had evaporated, replaced by a tension I could taste. "You're not listening to me, Emma," Rachel said, pacing. Her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. "This isn't some romance novel. This is your life, your stepson's life. You're playing with." "I'm not playing," I whispered, fingers tight around my untouched wine glass. "Rachel, if you could just see—" "See what?" She whirled on me. "See how you've rationalized this? See how you're risking everything you've built? Your tenure review is in 3 months. What happens when this gets out?" "It won't." "It always gets out." Her palm slapped the counter, making me jump. "God, Emma, I love you, but you're being willfully blind." "What about holidays? Family gatherings? Are you going to hold hands at Christmas dinner? Kiss under the mistletoe while his grandparents watch?" Each question landed like a physical blow. I stared into my wine, watching ripples from my trembling hands. "We're being careful," I managed. Rachel sank into the chair across from me, reaching for my hands. "Careful isn't enough. Emma, look at me." I did, seeing tears in my oldest friend's eyes. "You're going to lose everything," she said softly. "Your job, your friends, your reputation. And when it all comes crashing down, because it will, you'll lose him too. The weight of all that judgment, all that scandal, it'll crush whatever this is between you." "You don't know that," I argued, but my voice shook. "I know human nature. I know family dynamics. I've counseled enough couples through impossible situations to recognize a ticking time bomb." She squeezed my hands. "End it now, while you can still salvage your relationship as mother and son." "I'm not his mother," I whispered. "You raised him." Rachel's voice cracked. "Since he was 12 years old, you've been his mother figure. You helped him with homework, nursed him through breakups, taught him to drive. You can't just erase that history because you're lonely and he's convenient." The accusation stung like a slap. I jerked away from her touch, standing so quickly my chair scraped loud against the floor.
Convenient? My voice came out raw. You think that's what this is? That I just decided one day to seduce my stepson because I was lonely?
Emma. No.
The tears came hot and fast now. You don't see him, Rachel. You don't see how he takes care of me, how he supports my art, how he makes me feel alive again. For the first time in my life, I'm not just someone's wife or mother or teacher. I'm just me. And he sees me. Really sees me. Of course he does, Rachel said gently. Because you raised him to be compassionate and observant, to care about others' feelings. You shaped him into the man he is. Can't you see how twisted that makes this? I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. I don't know how to stop loving him, I admitted brokenly. Rachel moved around the table, pulling me into her arms as I sobbed. Oh, honey, she whispered. You don't have to stop loving him. You just have to love him the right way. What if I can't? She stroked my hair like she used to in college when boys broke my heart. Then you need to leave. Take the Seattle job. Give both of you space to remember who you're supposed to be to each other. He'll hate me. Maybe at first. But better temporary hate than permanent destruction. She pulled back, wiping my tears. Emma, please. As your friend. As someone who loves you both. End this. Before it ends you. The drive home was a blur through tears. Rain hammered my windshield, matching the storm in my chest. I pulled over twice, unable to breathe through the sobs. Alex was waiting up when I got home, worry etched on his beautiful face. He took one look at me and opened his arms. I stepped back. Emma? His voice held confusion, hurt. Rachel's right, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. We have to stop. The devastation that crossed his features nearly broke me. I rushed upstairs before he could speak, locking my bedroom door. His footsteps followed. Emma, please, let me in. We can talk about this. Go away, Alex, I called through the door, sliding down against it. Please, just go away. I heard him sink down on the other side. Neither of us moved for hours, the door between us like the walls I needed to rebuild. Finally, near dawn, I heard him stand. I love you, he said softly. That's not going to change, no matter what Rachel or anyone else says. After his footsteps faded, I curled up on my floor and cried until there were no tears left. Sometimes doing the right thing feels exactly like dying. But as the sun rose, painting my room in shades of loss, I knew Rachel was right. I had to end this, even if it meant ending myself in the process. 3 days of avoiding each other in our own home became unbearable. His text was simple. Coffee at Marion's, 2 p.m., please. Marion's was neutral ground, a tiny cafe across town where nobody knew us. I arrived first, choosing a corner table away from windows. My hands shook as I arranged sugar packets, remembering countless family breakfasts here before everything changed. The bell above the door chimed. Alex stood silhouetted in the afternoon light, and my heart clenched. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes matching my own. The waitress approached, but he waved her off, sliding into the seat across from me. You look terrible, he said softly. So do you. I stared at my untouched coffee. Have you been sleeping? How could I? His laugh was hollow. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face when you came home that night. Like Rachel had convinced you I was some kind of mistake you needed to correct. Alex! No, let me finish. He leaned forward, voice low and intense. I've spent 3 days thinking about what she must have said. About propriety and scandal, and what people will think. About how I'm too young to know what I want, or how you're confused or lonely or whatever other excuses she made up. She's trying to protect us both, I whispered. From what? Happiness? His hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching mine. Emma, look at me. Please.
I did, drowning in those eyes that held my whole world. I know exactly what I'm risking, he said. My relationship with extended family, my social standing, maybe even my career. But you know what scares me more than losing all that?
I shook my head, unable to speak.
Spending the rest of my life watching you sacrifice your happiness for other people's comfort. Watching you dim your light again because someone else decided our love is wrong.
It's not that simple, I managed.
Yes, it is. He closed the distance, fingers brushing mine. Do you love me?
Alex, do you love me?
You know I do, I whispered, tears spilling. That's what makes this so hard. Then why are we letting Rachel or anyone else decide what that love should look like? His thumb traced patterns on my wrist, sending shivers up my arm. We're both consenting adults. We're not hurting anyone.
We're hurting ourselves, I argued weakly. This can't last. The secrecy, the judgment when people find out.
So we'll move, he said simply. After I finish my master's next year. We'll go somewhere nobody knows us. Start fresh.
You'd do that? Leave everything behind?
His smile was gentle. Emma, you are everything. The rest is just details. The waitress approached again. We both sat back, the moment broken.
She refilled our untouched coffees, oblivious to the weight of the conversation she'd interrupted.
After she left, I took a shaky breath. Rachel said I shaped you into who you are, that it makes this twisted.
No.
His voice was firm. You showed me what love should look like.
What partnership means. How to support someone's dreams and help them grow. If that shaped me, I'm grateful. But my feelings for you? Those are mine. Pure and simple.
There's nothing simple about this, I whispered. Maybe not. He reached for my hand again, this time holding on. But nothing worth having ever is. We sat there for hours, talking through every fear, every possibility. The coffee grew cold, the afternoon light faded to dusk. Other customers came and went, none paying attention to the woman and her stepson having what looked like any other family discussion. If they'd looked closer, they might have seen the way our fingers remained entwined. The way our eyes held conversations deeper than words. The way love radiated between us. Complicated and beautiful and absolutely unstoppable. As we finally stood to leave, Alex pulled me close in the darkened parking lot. No more letting other people decide our story, he whispered against my hair. Not even Rachel. I nodded, breathing in his familiar scent. What do we do now? Now? He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Now we go home, together, and tomorrow we start planning our future, whatever that looks like. People will talk, I warned. Let them. He kissed me softly, there in the shadows of Marion's parking lot. We know the truth. That's all that matters. Driving home separately, I thought about Rachel's warnings, about consequences and judgment and all the ways this could end badly.
But for the first time since that tearful night, I felt steady. Clear.
The autumn chill settled over campus as I threw myself into my tenure review preparations. Every evening, Alex and I would spread our work across the dining room table, his graduate thesis research mingling with my lecture notes. We'd developed a rhythm, passing coffee and trading gentle touches between paragraphs. One night in October, he looked up from his papers. Dr. Harrison offered me a research position, he said carefully, in Boston. My heart stopped. That's wonderful. The words felt like glass in my throat.
I turned it down. Alex, you can't.
I already did. He reached across the table, taking my trembling hands. I accepted a position at Wellington Institute instead, here in town. But Harrison's program is world-renowned. It could launch your career.
My career will be fine, he said firmly. I'm not leaving you. Not when we've finally found our way to each other. That night, As we lay together, I realized something profound. This wasn't some passing fancy or forbidden thrill. This was a man making conscious choices about his future, our future. During Christmas, we navigated family gatherings separately, maintaining appropriate distances. But later, in the privacy of home, we created our own celebrations. He surprised me with an artist's easel I'd been eyeing for months. I gave him his grandmother's wedding ring, not to wear, not yet, but as a promise. Rachel stopped talking to me after New Year's. Her last message read, "I hope you know what you're doing." It hurt, losing my oldest friend, but not as much as losing Alex would have. By spring, we'd started looking at houses in the Pacific Northwest, places where nobody knew our history, places where we could start fresh. His career in environmental science could flourish anywhere, and I'd already received interest from several private colleges. There were hard moments, of course, times when the weight of secrecy felt crushing, times when we had to pretend to be nothing more than polite family members in public, times when I caught whispers from colleagues who noticed I'd stopped dating. But every night I came home to his smile, to his unwavering support of my art, to conversations that lasted until dawn, to love that grew deeper and richer with each passing day. So no, he didn't find a nice girl and move on. Instead, we found something rare and precious, a love worth fighting for, regardless of society's expectations. Sometimes the best decisions aren't the ones others make for us. Sometimes they're the ones that require the most courage, the most faith, the most determination to see through. And as I watch him sleep beside me now, his face peaceful in the pre-dawn light, I know this with absolute certainty. The best decision I ever made was choosing us, even if it meant losing everything else. Because in the end, love doesn't follow rules or bend to others' expectations. It simply is. And what we have, it simply is everything.